An easy to put together apples and honey coffee cake that is non-dairy and everyone is going to love.
Sally that girl in the kitchen.
Hi everyone, and welcome to another episode of Sally that girl in the kitchen. In today's episode, I'm going to be teaching you how to make my apples and honey coffee cake. Yes, a delicious honey cake filled with apples and of course honey, because it is perfect to serve on the high Jewish holiday of Rosh Hashanah. So absolutely indispensable on the Rosh Hashanah table are apples and honey, and it's very typical to serve yummy food including these ingredients. So I came up with this delicious recipe that is filled with a combination of sweet and tart apples, because we will be adding honey into the mix. So I didn't want it to be overpowering. So I found the perfect combination of sweet and tart apples that, when baked together with that honey and the spices and some brown sugar, will bring this apples and honey cake over the top. So I will be baking this in 2 loaf pans. And of course, I wasn't going to call this apple and honey or apples and honey bread, because it kind of is reminiscent of a banana bread. But of course, that would not make any sense if we called it apples and honey bread. But that's what it kind of reminds me of when I bake these. When assembling, we're going to add a layer of those apples into the middle of this delicious apples and honey coffee cake, and we're going to add some more on top. So when we bake it, it just becomes caramelized, gorgeous, and smells amazing while it bakes. So being that it's non-dairy, it's perfect for any meal, any time of the year. Do not wait and only make this for Rosh Hashanah, because this is perfect all of the time. So I am super excited to teach you how to make this. So let's not wait another second and let's get started. For the apple mixture part of today's recipe, you will need 1.5 cups of cubed and peeled sweet apples. I'm going to be using Honeycrisp just because I find the name is very fitting, honey after all. But you could also use Gala or Fuji instead. And you'll probably only need 1 of these apples, but I like to buy 2 for good measure, because sometimes they're a little smaller or you're a little overzealous when you're peeling your apple. You'll also need 1 cup of cubed and peeled tart apples. And in this case, I'm going to be using Granny Smith, but you can also substitute that for Pink Lady instead. And again, 1 apple may suffice, but I like to pick up 2 for good measure. 1/2 cup of dark brown sugar, packed. 2 teaspoons of ground cinnamon, 3 tablespoons of all-purpose flour, and 3 tablespoons of avocado oil, or your favorite neutral flavored oil. And for the cake part of today's recipe, you will need 2¼ cups of all-purpose flour, 1 teaspoon of baking powder, 1/2 teaspoon of baking soda, 1/2 teaspoon of salt, 2 teaspoons of ground cinnamon, 1/2 teaspoon of ground nutmeg, 2 large eggs, which you should have at room temperature, 1/2 cup of avocado oil, or again, your favorite neutral flavored oil, 1/2 cup of honey, 1/2 cup of dark brown sugar, packed, 1 teaspoon of pure vanilla extract, 1/2 cup of unsweetened applesauce, 3/4 cup of non-dairy creamer, or your choice of a parve almond, oat, or soy milk, parve meaning non-dairy, and 1 teaspoon of apple cider vinegar. You will also need a paring knife, or you can use a potato peeler instead, a large knife, a cutting board, 2 loaf pans. These are 8.5 by 5 inches and they are Pyrex. I recommend definitely using glass or ceramic and not a metal loaf pan, because those will be reactive, and we're going to be using apple cider vinegar and baking soda, so you definitely want non-reactive loaf pans. You'll also need some nonstick cooking spray, a couple of large bowls, a medium bowl, a whisk, a fork, a scissor, some parchment paper, a cooling rack, some oven mitts, and a spatula and a silicone spoon. So now that we have all of our ingredients and tools together, let's get started. So the first thing you're going to want to do is grab your apples and wash them well, and then grab a cutting board and a knife. So as I said, we're going to use a combination of sweet and tart apples. I think it creates the perfect balance, especially when adding that honey and brown sugar. So you're going to want to peel your apples and then cut them into small cubes. You're looking to get 1 cup of the tart apples, and then of the sweet apples you want 1.5 cups. And then once you've cubed them up, you're just going to throw them together into a large bowl. I only ended up needing 1 apple of each and even had a touch left over of my tart apple. So right on top of that, you're going to want to add 1/2 cup of packed dark brown sugar, 2 teaspoons of ground cinnamon, 3 tablespoons of all-purpose flour, and 3 tablespoons of avocado oil or the neutral oil of your choice. Then just grab your silicone spoon and give that all a good stir. You just want to make sure that you coat all of the apples well and that all of the ingredients are evenly distributed. You just use the spoon to scrape the bottom and the sides of the bowl, making sure to coat the apples and that none of that flour or cinnamon or sugar sticks to the bottom and sides of the bowl. So now that your apples are nicely coated, you're just going to set those aside. And now would be a good time to preheat your oven to 350 degrees, making sure you have a rack placed in the center. Now, we're going to bring over our loaf pans and we're going to give them a nice spray with nonstick cooking spray. I'm using avocado oil spray, but you can use your preferred non-dairy nonstick spray. And then you'll notice that I'm also lining the loaf pans each with 2 pieces of parchment in a perpendicular fashion. So you're going to lay one way and then one the other way, and you're going to spray these 2 because what we're doing is we're creating a sling so that we don't have to flip over our apple and honey coffee cake when it's cooked. We can just gently lift it right out of our loaf pans. And you'll want to repeat that same process for the second loaf pan. So moving on to the cake part, you're going to grab your medium bowl and to it add 2¼ cups of all-purpose flour, then 1 teaspoon of baking powder, 1/2 teaspoon of baking soda, 1/2 teaspoon of salt, 2 teaspoons of ground cinnamon, and 1/2 teaspoon of ground nutmeg, and then grab a whisk and then give it all a good stir until well combined. Now set that bowl aside, and then you're going to grab your second large bowl and a fork, and then into that large bowl you're going to want to crack 2 room temperature eggs, and you're going to use that fork to beat those eggs well. Now once you've beaten those eggs, you're to add 1/2 cup of avocado oil or your neutral oil of choice. And then a good tip is to use that same cup where you measured the oil to add your honey into it. We're adding 1/2 cup of honey, but you'll notice that when you use the same cup that you just used for oil, the honey will slip out much easier and will tend to not stick to the cup. So it makes it a lot easier this way. And of course, we've been waiting for this moment because this is a apples and honey coffee cake after all. So this is where we get that yummy, delicious honey flavor in that delicious cake. So notice how that honey went right in. And of course, it clung to a little piece that apparently did not get coated in oil, but you get the idea. It just slips out so much easier when it's coated in the oil first. So of course, I'll grab that little touch of honey that stayed behind because we don't want to miss any of that yummy goodness. So now we're going to add in 1/2 cup of packed dark brown sugar, 1 teaspoon of pure vanilla extract, 1/2 cup of unsweetened applesauce. This is really going to bring that apples and honey flavor to our coffee cake. It's going to have not only pieces of apple, but it has applesauce and honey running throughout. You can only imagine how delicious this is going to be. And then we'll add 3/4 of a cup of, in my case, I'm using non-dairy creamer, but as I said, you can use your choice of non-dairy almond, oat, soy milk, whatever you prefer. And then finally, I'm going to add 1 teaspoon of apple cider vinegar. That's going to react with the baking soda and really just give this beautiful apple and honey coffee cake a nice rise. So then I'm coming in with that same whisk, and then I'm just going to bring all of these ingredients together. I want to make sure there are no clumps of sugar, and I just want to make sure that all these ingredients become well incorporated. So this is what it should look like once it's all been well mixed, and now we're ready to combine our wet and dry ingredients. So what I like to do is I like to grab a spatula and bring over the dry ingredients, and then I'm going to add these in about 1/3 or 1/4 at a time, and then just very gently use that spatula to incorporate that flour. So let me put that flour bowl down and show you what I mean. I'm just going to gently come in, give this a stir, and then I'm going to scrape down the sides of the bowl and pretty much just fold these ingredients in gently. I'm using the back of the spatula to break up any clumps in the flour, but I'm mixing gently. I'm not over mixing, and I'm also scraping the bowl as I go. So once you see less of that white flour, then that is your cue to come in and add a little bit more. And again, you're just going to stir it, fold it in gently, and break up the clumps, scrape down the sides of the bowl as you go along. And then once this portion becomes integrated, it will start to look almost like pancake batter. That's when you know you're ready to add your last portion. And again, you'll repeat the same process. You're just going to stir it gently, kind of fold it in as you go, and then use your spatula to break up any clumps of flour. So this is what it should look like. This is the consistency you're looking for once you've incorporated all those dry ingredients. This is perfect. I wish you could smell it. It's smelling great already. So now I've brought over my prepared loaf pans because now it's time to assemble. So what we'll be doing here is we're going to be adding 1/4 of the batter as our base layer into each of these 2 loaves. And why do I say 1/4? Because once we add that bottom layer, then we're going to be adding apples, and then another layer of this cake mixture on top. So you don't want to use all of the cake mixture on the bottom layers. You just want 1/4 in one loaf pan, 1/4 in the other loaf pan, and then the remaining we're going to be using after we add apples. So now, as you can see, I've created my bottom layer in each of my loaf pans. I tried to make them as equal as I can. They don't have to be perfect. So now, once I've done that, then I'm going to move on to add those delicious spiced apples that we created. This smells ridiculous. And when you bake this, the entire house is going to smell of apples and cinnamon and honey, and it's just absolutely delicious. So I'm going to visually just kind of separate because I'm going to be using 1/4 on each of these loaf pans, just like I did with the cake mixture. I'm going to add 1/4 of the apples to make one layer on one loaf pan, and then 1/4 of the apples to make a layer on the other loaf pan. So now I've added apples to both of my loaves. I still have 1/2 of this apple mixture, and as I said earlier, it doesn't have to be perfect because these apples and these spices are going to bake in to our apple and honey coffee cake, and it's just going to be absolutely delicious. So now I'm going to grab my batter once again, and I'm going to top each of these apples with
another fourth of the original mixture, and by then I will have used all of the cake mixture. And then, of course, as expected, I'm just going to wipe my counter down, and then I'm going to bring over the rest of the apples, and I'm going to split this in half and cover both of these with a beautiful topping of those delicious spiced apples, which, if you'll notice by now, the sugars have almost melted down and just caramelized, and they're going to get even more golden and delicious when we bake them. The smell already without baking is crazy. Once we pop these in the oven, the smell is going to be intoxicating. So you're going to want to place them on a center rack of your oven and set a 55-minute timer to allow them to bake. And then take that aroma in. The smell is incredible. It's apples and honey and warm spices. What could be better? And look at how great they look. So by adding those apples as a top layer, the apples get a chance to caramelize and they're exposed. So you get a glimpse as to what to expect inside of this perfect apples and honey coffee cake. And as you can see, I'm using a skewer. You can use a toothpick. You always want to test the center for doneness and make sure that it comes out clean. And if not, then of course you can always pop it in a few more minutes in the oven if it needed a little more time. But mine was perfect. So take a close-up look at these and tell me this does not look absolutely gorgeous, delicious, and inviting. They're super yummy. They're easy to make, very simple ingredients, and they even freeze well. If you let these come to room temperature and wrap them really well, you can freeze them and then thaw them the day you need to serve them. So they're just an easy, delicious, impressive dessert, and really just honey cake, but leveled up. It's apples and honey coffee cake, and it's so crazy good. So you're going to want to leave these in the loaf pans for 15 minutes before pulling them out. So what I like to do is set a 15-minute timer, and that way I'm sure to give them plenty of time in the hot loaf pans. And then after the 15 minutes have passed, that's when you can come in, lift them out with the use of the convenient slings that we created out of parchment paper, and then place them onto a cooling rack to fully cool. I like to give them a full 45 minutes before slicing into them, but of course, no one will judge you if you cannot resist because the smell is crazy good, and they're just so gorgeous with those chunks of apple running throughout and all over the top. They're just incredibly inviting. And as I said, they're kind of reminiscent to banana bread in terms of their loaf shape and even their color, but you can tell these are apple with those caramelized, gorgeous apples on top, and that almost syrup that was created by mixing the brown sugar in with the cinnamon and the apples. It just creates an incredible effect that is gorgeous, and even more so, it's yummy. So now 45 minutes have passed. I'm going to place them on a serving tray, and I'm going to cut into one because it's time to try it and to take a bite. Who am I kidding? To eat a slice. It is golden and caramelized and just absolutely beautiful and filled with apples. You saw how we created that layer in the middle, so those apples will kind of float and sink and just kind of be all over the place. So we'll have random apples running throughout, and of course that layer of apples on top. And it has that traditional honey cake color, but those apples make it extra special and extra inviting, and trust me, extra flavorful and delicious. Look at that apple just peeking through as I break into this. You see that piece right there sticking out, just trying to say, hey, I'm here. It's just absolutely perfect. The crumb is perfect. It's nice and moist and soft on the inside, but kind of crispy and delicious on the outside. Mm, Complete perfection. And those apple pieces, this particular bite right there with that piece of apple sticking out of the top. So crazy good. It's like the most delicious honey cake you've ever tried, with the addition of these incredible apples running throughout. It's just absolutely perfect. I can think of no better dessert, especially for a holiday like Rosh Hashanah. But truthfully, for any time of the year, because it's that good and it's easy to put together. And as I said, honey cake, no offense, but it can be a little bit boring. But there's nothing boring about this apples and honey coffee cake. It's delicious. It's got a little bit of a bite to it, a little bit of chewiness from those caramelized apples. But still that spongy, delicious center that we know and love and come to expect in a really good honey cake.
So how incredibly delicious does this apples and honey coffee cake look? Did you see those chunks of apple as I just pulled that slice apart? They would just pop out. And of course, the top of this apples and honey coffee cake is filled with those cubed pieces of apple and cinnamon, and just smells absolutely crazy good and tastes even better. It's really an absolutely yummy and easy to put together dessert. And it's really great because it's not your typical honey cake. No offense to honey cake, but it can be kind of boring. This is really going to level up your honey cake game, and I have no doubt that everyone is going to love it. Trust me. No, better yet, don't trust me. You're going to have to try to make this recipe yourself. And of course, when everyone loves it, please let them know that Sally, that girl in the kitchen, taught you how to make it. And of course, if you're not following Sally, that girl on social media, please follow me as Sally, that girl in the kitchen on Facebook, Instagram, and on Pinterest. And you can find me as Sally, that girl FL on X, Snapchat, and on TikTok. And you can also find me on Threads, and I have an Amazon shop. So if you're looking to find all these different places that I am on social media, you can just go to the banner of my YouTube channel on your cell phone, on your computer, or even visit Sally, that girl in the kitchen on Facebook and Instagram or TikTok. And right at the top, I always have pinned a link tree with all of the links to all of the places you can find me, including that Amazon shop, in case you see anything, a tool or something that I may have used in one of my videos that you may want to pick up. It's usually featured there. And of course, if you're not already subscribed to Sally, that girl in the kitchen here on YouTube, please stop what you're doing, go over, subscribe, touch that little notification bell, because I don't want you to miss out on all the amazing, delicious recipes that I'm constantly putting out. And of course, the hundreds that I've already put out. There are tons, and I break them down by playlists, so you can look for them: appetizers, desserts, main dishes, breads, cakes. This one is probably going to go under cakes, but I also have a Jewish dishes playlist and a Sephardic Turkish dishes playlist. So if you can't find it in one, you'll find it in the other, but it'll be easy for you to locate my recipes because it's pretty clear the way I break it all down. So I think you're going to have fun exploring there too. So once again, I just want to take a moment to thank you so much for joining me. The ones who are here time and time again, thank you so much for watching. And to all of you that are new to my channel, thanks so much for joining me today. And I hope to see you around again soon. And as I always like to say at the end of all of my videos, see you next time.
Sally, that girl in the kitchen.